James Dean, the rebel without a cause, the sex symbol of the 50s, the teenage delinquent, I guess you would say, heartthrob. But in 1955, September 23rd, 1955, this rebel without a cause bought a Porsche 550 Spyder, brand new. Now, James Dean was known for an actor, of course, and he wore the black leather coat, the biker gang type thing, and rode a motorcycle, and he was into race cars, and smoked a cigarette with a white t-shirt underneath it, that I find very attractive in men, a white t-shirt. But getting back to it, James Dean was the heartthrob, and he had several affairs, several powerful women in Hollywood as lovers, and maybe today's topic, one of them was jilted, and they put a curse on this 1955 Porsche Spyder. His little car that he was going to race in the Salina Road Race in Paso de Robles, now California. Now, Dean, when he bought the car, he had taken and shown his British actor friend, Alec Guinness. And Guinness, first minute he seen him by it, standing beside it, he said, "Dean, never get in the car. Never, ever get in that car." Something about it was evil, completely evil. Very sinister, very dark. Just the vibes around it was very bad. Mysterious, call it a sixth sense, call it something, but he said, if you get in that car, you will be found dead within a week of it. You will be found dead by this time next week. And of course, Dean was like, oh yeah, right, buddy, whatever. Whatever. This is a brand new car, there ain't nothing gonna go wrong with it. But Guinness was like freaking out. Like, hey, you can't get in this car. He was really adamant about it, and he kept on telling his friend, no, don't get in it. Well, Dean, as a rebel as he portrayed in his movie, said, no way, I'm going to do it. So he took it to a custom painter, and this custom painter, John Barris, fixed the brakes, put new brakes on and stuff, the really race car brakes or whatever you want to call it, and painted Little Bastard on the back of it at James Dean's request. That's what he was going to call his brand new race car, was Little Bastard. Now, race cars are different than regular vehicles. Race cars are not the same as they are now. Now they have roll bars, they have all of the works to protect the drivers. Back in them days, it was just a little tin can, soda can that you were sitting in, more or less. You had nothing, and most of them were convertibles. So you had no roll bars, no hood to save them. More aerodynamics back in them days because of that, I guess. But yeah, this was his prized possession, and Dean was not going to take, any goofy suggestion that his friend said, seriously. So, on that unfortunate day of September 23rd, 1955, Dean was driving it home, and like he said, he stopped, and his friend, told him not to do it, don't do it. Please don't do it, you'll die, you'll be found dead in it within a week. And So Dean took it to his professional mechanic, and like I said, that he got it customized, and his professional mechanic um, was Rolf Worthenschnitz. Worthenschnitz. Now, Rolf was his major mechanic. He worked on all of Dean's cars, all of Dean's Porsches. He was an expert at Porsches, and Dean's friend Bill Hicksman was going to follow Dean and Wolfenschurch. Well, Rolf, I'm going to call him Rolf because his last name is very too hard. So his friend Guinness and Hickman was going to follow behind Dean and um, Rolf, and they were going to be taking the Spyder and driving it because Rolf wanted Dean to test drive it, before the big race. Well, Dean agreed, and that's what they were going to do. They were going to drive it down to the race instead of towing it down on the back of a vehicle. And of course, Guinness was very like, no, don't do this, don't do this. I'm begging you. And Dean did it anyway, of course. But they followed him. And then with that, excuse me, Dean and them were pulled over by a police officer on Route 466. And they were ticketed because they were racing too fast. They were speeding too fast. And they were going like a 66 in a 50-mile-an-hour zone. So it was pretty fast back in them days. I mean, a little tiny car like that, but it wasn't nothing compared to, what he got clocked at later. This, with the two in the seat, Rolf and Dean was in the car, and they were driving down the road on Route 466, and a young student from California, a Polytech State University, driving a Ford two-door, which back in them days, like I said, the race cars were made like out of tin can, fiberglass crap. And then the cars was a big, they were made out of steel. I mean, you could obtain very little damage to vehicles back then because everything was a steel frame. It's hard to bend steel. They were made out of heavy metal. And the frame and everything was like that. So this young student was driving down the road, and he was going to make a left-hand turn, and Dean, barreling down at 85 miles an hour by then, come down the road, and as he turned, this student turned, Dean hit him head on, or hit him, like boom, T-boned him, or whatever you want to call him. And it flew. It made the Ford, go 40 feet down the road, and made the Porsche fly down the road too, and threw Rolf out from the Porsche, and Dean was trapped inside the Porsche. By the time the paramedics had gotten there, they had to cut Dean out with the crowbar because they didn't have jaws of life back then. They took Dean out with a crowbar and got him in the ambulance and everything, and took Rolf, which he survived, and took him in another ambulance, and the gentleman who hit them, this Beringling, Dean Beringling was, not Dean Beringling, I'm sorry. The gentleman that hit him, or Dean hit, was taken to the hospital too. But the weird coincidence is that Dean's ambulance got in a car wreck on the way to the hospital, and They took him to the Paso Robles War Memorial Hospital, and Dean sustained neck injuries, broken neck, several broken bones, internal bleeding, and he was pronounced dead at 6:20 p.m. on exactly 1 week later, after he bought the car that his British friend, had told him not to get into. Now, was that an omen? That his British friend, seeing the darkness of this car and knew exactly that he would die 1 week later and be found dead in this car 1 week later. Now, technically, he didn't die in the car, but he did die in the car crash, and he died at the hospital because they couldn't save him. It just, that is something weird but true. Now, as far as James Dean, he died at 6:20 p.m. He was only 24 years old, and he loved to race and be the adrenaline junkie that he was. He loved to do everything dangerous. But as far as the curse of the car, could it have been a scorned lover or an affair that didn't go right and they put a curse on it? Put the curse on the car? Because it was a brand new car. Why would they put a curse on it? There wouldn't be nothing on it, attached to it, until Dean had bought it. Could it have been afterwards, after Dean had passed away? The car was totaled. It was just a crunched up tin can. In fact, I used it as a thumbnail at the beginning of this video. And it showed how damaged the vehicle was. I'm surprised that any of them survived, other than, Dean was the only one that perished in it. But the car was a total loss, and it was sold off parts to parts. Now, the first one was a Barris. Barris was an owner of Customs George Barris Cars, king of the customs cars. Now, he took it from show to show. He took it to movie theaters. He took it to high schools. He took it to everything. And he sold what he could out of the parts. Now, parts he sold off were tires from the vehicle of James Dean's car, which the owner that bought those tires, he was heading home, and the tires blew, both at the same time, the two tires that was sold off of James Dean's car. He had also sold parts of the engine to a Esrich, who was a race car driver, and also to another race car driver, a doctor friend, a Troy McHenry. Now, Esrich crashed in 1956 sports race at Pomona, and so did McHenry. Now, McHenry died because he crashed right into a tree. But Esrich crashed, but he survived with major injuries and recovered later in the same race. Now, the curse of the little bastard grew big time. Big time. It was James Dean's cursed car that did it. Now, as far as Barris, he started to take these to these shows. Like I said, he would take them to bowling alleys, to movie theaters, to high schools. Well, the first show he was taking it to, the garage that he had it stored in caught on fire, and it burnt to the ground. Now, it completely burned the whole building down and did not touch James Dean's car. It was the only thing that wasn't touched in the building. That's kind of odd, you know. That's strange to think that the only thing that wasn't touched was James Dean's vehicle. The second time he tried to go to a car show or to a high school, he had it on display to show how driving fast or under the influence or whatever would be reckless to kids. The car fell down and broke a teenager's hip who was looking at the vehicle. Slid down and hit the teenager's hip and broke it. Luckily, the kid survived, but you want to touch it? Nah, I don't think so. The third time this display that was coming out, they had the Spyder fell completely off and killed the driver of the vehicle that it was transporting, a George Baracus. Now, the who transported it to car shows, you know, was really that a part of the curse? I'm thinking so too, you know. Why else? Now, in 1960, supposedly the Porsche disappeared in a car crash. They were transporting it from Miami, Florida, to Los Angeles, and it crashed, and nobody had found it. It disappeared, completely disappeared. The car, James Dean's car, disappeared. Now, could it have been people at the crash site who had taken this car, knowing its curse, and hid it somewhere? Could it be spectators taking it, parts of this famous car, knowing how famous James Dean's was, and things like that, that they wanted a part of memorabilia from the famous icon, James Dean? Or did somebody tuck it away because of the curse and hid it? Now, Barris, since he was the owner of it, and it's been 60 years since he's passed now, there's still no sign of this car. And in fact, in 2005, which was 18 years ago, the car still remains missing, and there's millions, probably up to $2 million reward for this vehicle. Now, this one, the story of James Dean, followed the people that were involved in it, of course. The young driver got threats that he had killed James Dean. The Ralph that was in the passenger seat of James Dean's car, who survived, got death threats from Dean's fans, saying that he was the cause of the accident. He was the one who pushed Dean to drive it to the race, you know, to test drive it and get a feel for it. That led on to these men having deep depression and psychological effects of it all throughout their entire life, to where they led up to drinking. And actually, Ralph tried killing his wife by stabbing her 14 times and ended up in prison, and ended up in a car wreck, and it killed him exactly the same way Dean died. Broken neck, all the same injuries, and they had to use the jaws of life to get him out. So, did it follow him throughout those years? And why would it follow him if it didn't have that curse? I don't know how that curse the theory of the curse on the car would be affecting Rolf all throughout the years. I think that psychologically he lost it because he was blamed for it and he felt guilty for Dean's death through all these years. And that's what led to his alcoholism and to try to stab his wife and his depression and things like that. So that probably could be scraped off the list of the curse. But the others, I don't know. That is something weird. Now, with this theory of supposedly, and it's just my theory, supposedly, like I said, Dean was a heartthrob. And back in them days, affairs were nothing, like drinking a cup of coffee in the day, I guess. And since he was a major heartthrob and the stud, he did have several affairs and several women who was of power and were married to powerful men. And maybe one of them got PO'd off enough to put a curse on him on the vehicle because he chose racing as his adrenaline junkie that he was over them. Or maybe, they got mad because they found out he was having more affairs than just them. Who knows? Maybe that's why they say a woman who is scorned, he'll have no fury as a woman scorned. Who knows? But that is the story of James Dean's car. His 550 Porsche Spyder. The little bastard. Now, today, like I said, nobody knows where it's at. I'm sure that you can go and look at pictures of this all over the place and on the YouTube or look it up on Google. But would you actually want to try to touch this or have a piece of this vehicle? No. Why push fate? Why push the unknown? Now, thank you for watching Fear Friday. Next Wednesday, it'll be another edition of Weird But True Wednesdays. It will be the Crying Boy painting, which has another amazing story to it. Please like and subscribe and share some kindness and shine your beacon of light for those in the dark.